Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us for today's live webinar. We'll give everybody a few moments to log on, find the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. I am here in kind of cloudy Minnesota today. Andy, you are no
I am
longer in the
in,
tropics. So
no,
what's
I'm no
the
longer
weather
in the
like where you're
tropics.
at?
I am in very wet, rather cold Alberta. And when I say rather cold, in Canadian terms, it was 5 degrees this morning. In American terms, it was about 41.
Oh, that is chilly.
Welcome to August.
Yeah, I suppose winter is coming. Thanks everybody for finding the chat. That will be important for us later on today as we go through today's presentation. We want to make sure that this becomes as collaborative as we can make it in a virtual setting. So feel free to make comments or questions along the way in the chat. Look at that go. Phoenix,
We have a
Paris.
global audience.
Yeah, amazing. Great to have everybody here. Today, we'll be talking about the power of portfolio thinking, but a quick introduction of myself. So my name is Rachel Hentges. I'm the Director of Demand Gen here at Tempo. For the last decade, I've helped organizations think a little bit differently about how they deliver business outcomes through effective project delivery through events like this, as well as industry recognized research. I'm joined today by Andy Jordan, a well-known PMO and project management thought leader in the space, speaker, author, LinkedIn Learning instructor. If you haven't checked out one of Andy's LinkedIn Learning courses, I highly recommend you do so. I think there's 3. Andy will correct me if I'm incorrect in that. 4 of them, there you go, I am incorrect. So highly recommend going to check those out. A lot of them align with some of the topics that we'll be talking about today. Welcome, Andy, and thanks everybody for joining us today.
Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate being here.
So today we'll be walking through portfolio thinking, the concept of it, what it is and why it matters to you. We'll look at the shift from projects to portfolios and what that means for your organization. Not only the benefits, but what it looks like to make portfolio thinking a reality for your organization. And as promised, we'll get to those questions at the end. Let's get talking about portfolio thinking. Can you walk us through what this concept is and how it's different from maybe the traditional planning and project management motion that some organizations are used to?
Sure. So I've been working in project environments for best part of 3 decades now. Yes, I really am that old. And for most of that time, the world and all the organizations I've been working with have taken this sort of top level approach to how they plan out and manage the work that they do. The executives will set the goals and objectives, and then they'll communicate that out to the various different areas in the business, the regional offices, the departments, whatever. And then each of those departments comes up with project proposals that they think will align with those goals and objectives. You then have everybody get together, talk about why their idea is the best one in the history of the world and why it needs to be approved. And they'll say, I can deliver this for about 1 million and it'll deliver us about, at least $87 billion in revenue. It'll be awesome. And it's a sales pitch, and things are approved based on who knows who and who scratches whose back and claims that are never really, justified. And then we deliver all that work and wonder why the value didn't actually come out of it. And there's a fundamental disconnect right at the start of the process, where I've put that red line in here, that the executives say it's really important in the next 12 months that we reduce costs by 7%, we expand revenue by 8%, we increase our margin by 2 points, we improve customer satisfaction by 6 points, whatever it might be. They set these goals and objectives, but then they stand back and don't do anything. And the different departments have to say, okay, I can do this to try and align with it. And the problem with that approach is those departments also have their own goals and objectives that they have to meet. And I've been involved with all these planning sessions and I know what happens. And the VPs and at some points I've run those departments. So, we all say, okay, I think if we do this, we can say we contribute to this goal and objective of the organization, but maybe more importantly, it allows us to do what we need to do as a department for us to be successful and for me to get my bonus. So it's not really forced alignment. It's a disconnect in place there that the execs are saying one thing, the departments are saying something else, and maybe kind of sort of it comes together. And if any of you have been working in this environment, and I'm sure most of you have been, you know full well that come the end of the year, all those claims have not met and the organization's struggling to achieve its overall goals and objectives. When you switch that and say, okay, forget putting the project front and center right from the start by having those proposals done by the department heads. Let's stick to what really matters, which is the portfolio. If you're the CEO of an organization and you say these are the five, six, whatever it is, goals and objectives that have to be achieved by the organization, then I like that call. I like that chat message,
Yeah, have you been in my organization? It sounds like
Yeah,
there might be some familiarity here, Andy.
yeah, it's like I'm not exactly reinventing the wheel here. Um, but if you are an executive, you don't set those goals and objectives because you think they might be a nice idea. You set those goals and objectives because that's what you need to deliver to keep the shareholders happy, the investors happy, to keep the board of directors happy, to keep your darn job. You have to deliver on that stuff. So when you start thinking from the portfolio, you're saying, okay, what is important to this organization is achieving these collective goals and objectives. It doesn't matter whether we do project A or project B. We need to get this portfolio performance where it needs to be. So now we keep the executives involved in the proposals. And I put project proposals there just because it keeps it consistent with the row above. But where we really start is by saying, okay, these are the investments that we need to make. We don't go straight from increase revenue by 5% to here's a brand new project and it's got all these features and it's going to be great and it'll take me 6 months to deliver and all these things will happen. It's like, okay, in order to increase revenue by 6%, we're going to look at launching a new product into this existing market, or we're going to look to expand into a new market. What does that look like? That's what we get defined by the executives. And then we say, all right, Rachel, you're now accountable for that new product. It's up to you to define exactly what that looks like. But you have approval, you have authorization to deliver this investment. You'll have however much money to deliver on it, and it's up to you to define the different work packages, projects in a program, work packages in a project, depending on the size of it, in order to do that. It's then up to you to stand up the teams to deliver that work. Don't care if it's plan driven, hybrid, agile, ad hoc, whatever it is, deliver that work. And what you're going to be measured on is whether or not the $10 million that we give you as an investment is generating $12 million in revenue or whatever the market share is or whatever the cost reduction, risk reduction, all those other things. That's what we're going to measure you on. And it stays with the executives right from the start, right from the start. So it's a completely different way of thinking. Instead of the exec saying, here's what's important, go make it happen, the execs are saying, here's what's important, here's the key ways that we're going to deliver that, go figure out the details, and I'll measure your success based on whether or not you achieve the return on investment that we need. So very different way of thinking. I know I spent a little bit of time on that slide, but I think it's a really important foundational concept.
And Andy, we had a good question come in from Guy. He's saying, I'm having a bit of difficulty on the immediate disconnect spot in the flow. From my experience, it seems the disconnect is more between project delivery and the value realization. So what would be your, I guess, comment to that particular, I guess, feedback on this particular
I
slide?
think there's definitely a disconnect between project delivery and value realization as well, in that in a lot of organizations, the project manager is still held accountable for on time, on scope, and on budget. And once the solution is handed over to the customer, the sponsor, customer representative, internal user, whatever it is, then the PM goes off and does something else. The team gets distributed to other areas of the business, and no one actually monitors whether or not that value is being achieved. The problem is that disconnect is, did the solution that we put in place to deliver $5 million dollars actually achieve $5 million dollars? The earlier disconnect is, this project that we're approving, is it even capable of achieving $5 million dollars? Or are we setting ourselves up for failure before we even start? We don't measure performance until after the solution is delivered. There's not enough people taking a step back and saying, you know, I know the business case says this, I know the claims say that, but if we approve this piece of work, we're setting ourselves up for failure before the first task on the project is even undertaken, because there is no way that that particular piece of work is capable of achieving the goals and objectives that we need. So there's definitely a second disconnect there, but I think that the second one becomes irrelevant if the first one's already taken us in the wrong direction. Still an important issue, though. Good question, Guy.
Yeah, great question. And thanks, Andy, for going through that in detail. Now that we know that what the portfolio, I guess, thinking concept looks like, we want to hear from you. what are you using today to manage your portfolio? So we're going to pop up a quick poll question, if you wouldn't mind, and let us know what you're using today to manage your portfolios. Are you utilizing various spreadsheets, a PPM tool, a project management specific tool? Maybe you're actually using the Tempo solutions today. If you wouldn't mind just taking a second there to fill in your responses. And while you all are doing that, we'll answer Elizabeth's question. So the execs who set the goals should make sure the project proposals, if successful, will achieve the goals. And that's, I guess, more of a question from Elizabeth there, Andy.
Yes, they should, but the problem is that I'm going to say they're incapable of, and that sounds like I'm bad mouthing them, and I don't mean that. But when departments put proposals together, the details that are involved are way lower in the organization than most of the execs get to from a regular understanding standpoint. So they say, we need to do a cost reduction of this much. Okay, if an operational VP says, all right, I want to do this project that's going to replace my legacy system. It's going to automate some workflows. And if we do this, I'm going to reduce cycle time on every transaction by 7%. I'm going to be able to reduce the headcount by 2%, whatever it might be. It sounds perfectly legitimate. And to an executive who doesn't understand the mechanics and shouldn't understand the mechanics of how that works, then that does make sense. The problem is that a lot of those VPs of operations, and I'm not saying it's a conscious effort, they're going, okay, here's a chance to get rid of that system that everybody hates and that takes too long sometimes. And we can claim it's contributing to the strategic goals and objectives. So we got a pretty good chance of getting this approved. There's no objective analysis up front, say whether or not replacing that system, increasing the automation is actually going to achieve what the organization needs to achieve. That's the disconnect that happens. If instead the execs just say, all right, you know what? You need to reduce costs here. I'm looking for you to do it through modernization, automation, and staff reduction. That's what has to happen. That's what your performance is going to be measured on. How you make that happen is up to you. You then, if you're the VP of operations, don't have to focus on the proposal that has the best chance of being approved because you're already told you're getting funding to deliver something. You then focus on delivering the best solution to achieve the goals and objectives. Look at that. Wow. I'm terrified. You know that. 28% of people say they're using spreadsheets, Rachel.
I can't see the results, but you can. So can you read them off to me, Andy? 23%
Oh, I
spreadsheet.
can. Well, it's going live
Okay.
still. So we haven't ended the poll yet, but
Oh,
in
okay. So
fact,
let's end the poll and then let's just take a look at some of the results here on this one. I know there are some comments in the chat around there should be a multiple choice option, but I guess hopefully you went with the one that makes the most sense.
so I can hit end poll on this one. So let me do
Okay,
that.
thank
And
you.
let me share the results, and then everyone should see that. There we go. So we ended
Oh,
up
there we go.
30%. You see it now?
I do now. Yes.
There you go. So
30%
third, yeah.
spreadsheets. Yeah, wow. And then 33% using a project management tool, 19% of you using Tempo. Love to hear that. And 18% a project portfolio management tool. Um, Interesting results there for sure. And let's dive in a little bit why maybe spreadsheets aren't the best solution for doing this shift from projects to portfolios. Uh, it's a change in perspective, right? We talked a little bit about that creates this new level of agility. Instead of asking how do we deliver this project, we're asking what's the best use of our people and investment to meet these goals. So Andy, let's talk through what does this look like?
Yeah, so let's take a step back and think about portfolios from a different context rather than from an organizational standpoint. All of us, most of us, have some concept, some connection with a portfolio. If you're in the UK, you have, or most of Europe, you have some kind of personal or company pension plan. In North America, you've got 401ks. In Canada, we've got RRSPs. You may have registered plans for children's education or for your own savings or whatever it might be. You have an investment portfolio of some form. And while you care about whether or not your Apple shares or your whatever shares are doing well within that portfolio, you likely care a lot more about the overall performance of that portfolio. Is the set of investments that you're managing or that someone is managing on your behalf going to allow you to retire when you want to and live the life you want? Is it going to give enough money to fund university when your kids reach the age that they're off to university? Something Rachel probably cares about with twins, two at the same time. So is that going to deliver? That's what matters. You care a little bit about each investment, each project in corporate sense, but nowhere near as much as you care about the overall portfolio. And that's the real heart of this portfolio thinking. You're focused on ROI. And when we say ROI, return on investments, we're not just talking dollars. Return may be innovation. It may be positioning the organization for future strategic success. It may be risk reduction. It may be NPV, the net promoter value, net promoter score for the organization for clients. It may be employee satisfaction. It could be a combination of all those things. It probably will be. But you look at what is happening in your organization, what do we have the capacity to deliver? And you have to also think skills there, not just people. How well aligned is the work that we're doing with the returns that we need to achieve, not just numerically, but also category wise? What levels of risk are we exposing the organization to by pursuing this? Simple example, if you put 80% of your discretionary budget into AI initiatives, that's pretty high risk. On the other hand, if you put 99% of your discretionary budget into incremental improvements to existing products and in systems, that's probably not taking enough risk because you're not going to be able to grow as much. And then how are we able to adapt and adjust to the fact that the world is changing pretty darn rapidly these days? And what we approve on day one is not going to be what we need to deliver on day 365. So we need to be able to adapt and adjust. You have to think about all those different factors in that context of the overall performance of the portfolio, not in the context of an individual initiative or even the set of individual initiatives, because the risk of sort of saying something for dramatic effect, the projects themselves don't matter. They're irrelevant to the overall performance of the portfolio. They can be replaced, and maybe they need to be replaced sometimes.
Yeah, and I love this slide because it speaks to why portfolio thinking matters, right? It's not just about the efficiency, it's about purpose. Like you just mentioned, work becomes more meaningful when everyone understands not just what they're doing, but why they're doing it. We see the shift in team engagement, productivity, and even retention when organizations adopt this mindset. So, Andy, what other things can we think about when we're looking at managing this bigger picture?
I think what you say there about retention is critically important, right? I mean, at the end of the day, organizations don't succeed because a piece of work gets done. They just don't. Organizations succeed because a group of people come together to give everything they can to deliver success for that organization. And they do that because they're engaged, they're motivated, they want the organization to succeed, they're invested personally in that success. Well, there's a study that comes out every year on employee engagement. I've said this before on webinars. And the latest version of the study said that global employee engagement was around 33%, 1 in 3 people. And that was a record high. It's never been better than that. Well, if only 1 in 3 of your employees are engaged, that's a real problem. And it suggests that those people don't think they're working on what matters. They maybe don't understand, but a good proportion of them don't think they're focused on the right stuff. And that's where this really gets to. If you've got people focused on directly contributing to the success of the business, not please complete this task or please get through these items from the backlog, but please contribute to our market share, our strategic performance, our ability to innovate. And you can make that line a direct connection through the work that's being done. People care about it. They need to understand that what matters is achieving performance for the business, not doing a particular thing. Think about your personal life again. Think about your family life. We all have friends and family, and we want those friends and family to be happy and engaged. And, we host barbecues in the summer, or we have people around to dinner, or we go out to a movie, not because, or we desperately want to grill a piece of meat or, drink a bottle of wine or whatever, but because we want that experience. We want our kids to enjoy watching the movie, or we want to, give them something that they'll remember. Whatever it is, it's the experience that matters, not the thing. And that's what this is really about. It's focusing on that bigger picture. Organizations are really no different to families, in one sense. It's about focusing on that big picture. Why are we doing it? Managing for the overall, not the details. So this kind of really sort of matters, Rachel.
It does matter, but how do organizations go and do that? Which obviously leads to this 5-step process, which isn't necessarily 5 steps because it's continuous, right? But can you talk to a little bit how do people go and do this?
Yeah, that's great, Andy, but give us something practical. So I mean, I'll talk a little bit about the sort of black text in the boxes, but it's this top stuff that does really matter, right? It's about making sure that you've got people involved in what they need to be involved in, and you've got everything aligned the way that it should be. So execs don't just set goals and objectives and step back. They're actually involved in not just this is what we need to achieve, but here's the high level stuff that we're going to do. And here's the thing that you personally are accountable for, VP, whatever it is, C suite. They need to make sure that there is consistent messaging. So you don't have one team thinking, oh, I thought we were supposed to focus on that this year. Well, no, because I thought we were supposed to achieve that this year. Well, maybe both are correct, but there needs to be communication around how these things come together so that every department has the same message, they understand it in the same way, and we don't have disagreement, conflict, misunderstanding. We need centralized portfolio management. There is one portfolio for the organization. You can break it out in different pieces from a more detailed management standpoint, but ultimately there is one discretionary budget, there is one pool of resources who can actually work on that, there is one set of funds that is ultimately available to be distributed to non-operational work. And you need to manage that centrally. You need to have the processes, the people, and the tools, we'll talk about that a little bit later, in order to have that enterprise-wide visibility. Standardization's a little bit of a scary one here because we're talking in a world where people are empowered, where we're working in different ways. Standardization doesn't mean here's the set of processes, you have to check every single box, if not the PMO will come and electrocute you. It's about saying here are the guardrails that everybody has to operate within, and within those guardrails, within those standard workflows and processes, you have the freedom to operate in the way you see fit. We recognize that there are going to be plan-driven, agile, hybrid, ad hoc, maybe new ways of working. There's going to be projects, there's going to be products, there's going to be value streams, there's going to be epics. All this kind of stuff is happening, and that's okay. They can still be standardized with multiple options. We then need to make sure that we're connecting everything together, back to that engagement, the integration piece, so that whether or not it's the first set of we need to achieve 5% revenue growth through to here's the piece of work that we're delivering and here's the benefits that it's achieving for us. All of those pieces have to be able to connect together. We have to join the dots all the way through so we understand not just what we're doing, but why we're doing it. We need to validate. We need to get away from what we talked about earlier about the project gets handed over and no one's actually held accountable for whether or not it delivered what it was supposed to deliver. And that sometimes means changing how you measure. You think about a new product. Well, success is revenue, right? It's easy to figure out whether or not that was achieving what it was needed to achieve. Not really, because revenue is a trailing indicator. You don't know what the first year revenue is until the end of the first year. So sometimes you need to look for proxies, you need to look for substitutes that you can use that are leading indicators that are a good suggestion of whether you'll hit that revenue target. And then you need to recognize that, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what the political or economic climate is, something is going to change, and it's going to change quicker than you think. And just as soon as you get your head around it, it's going to change again. And that's okay because you've built an organization that can adapt and adjust to that.
Yeah, and I think the audience can probably resonate with change. I think everybody on this call has experienced some sort of change over the last, 3, 6, 12 months, whatever it's been.
You think?
But yeah, that is constant. And that's something that as an organization, you need to be able to adapt and continue forward. So let's look at a practical example of this. Andy, I'd love for you to talk through this. It's kind of a busy slide, but it should make sense if we go from top to bottom.
Yeah. So this was a client that I worked with, and they'd been pretty successful. They were market leaders in terms of their product offerings. They were viewed as innovative, but the profitability wasn't where it needed to be for the kind of success that they should have been achieving. So they determined that when they were doing the planning, the execs got together, the C-suite got together and said, all right, a reasonable stretch goal, but achievable, is to reduce our overall operating costs by 3%. And that was where they stopped. They said, all right, that's what we need to achieve. They then identified a few different investment owners who would have a subset of funding from the discretionary budget in order to deliver a portion of that 3% overall reduction. One of those investment owners was responsible for replacing a customer relationship management CRM system that was taking too long for people to use. Some of the data in it was questionable. Some of the workflows didn't really give people what they want. There were disconnects. People were rekeying or importing data. There's a lot of risk associated with it. There was a lot of costs associated with it, and it just needed to be replaced. So the investment owner worked with all the different stakeholders and said, all right, here are the multiple projects that we're going to do. One was find a new supplier. One was clean up the data. One was look at the different workflows and interactions. One was looking at engaging with users to try and identify a UI and automation model that made sense for them. And it was going really well. They were shortlisting a supplier or a couple of suppliers to come up with a new solution. People were excited about what was going to happen. And then very unexpectedly, one of the competitors to this organization decided to exit the second largest market that the company operated within. So this had absolutely nothing to do with cost reduction, had absolutely nothing to do with this CRM project. But now the execs are saying, okay, no one saw this coming. Now we have an opportunity. Our second largest market has just seen our main competitor step away. There's now a whole bunch of customers in that market who are being underserved, and they're going to be looking for somebody else. And we don't have anything that can be more appealing to them. We can't scale what we provide to that market already. We don't have some of the features that these people are looking for. We're going to lose that opportunity unless we shift focus and suddenly look at how we can deliver a new, improved, more scalable solution to meet that now demand that wasn't there 2 weeks ago. So they decided as a C-suite, as an executive board, that they were going to shift their goals and objectives and say, you know what, cost reduction, it's not going away, it's still going to be important, but we're going to focus on that later. Right now, we're going to shift and we're going to try and expand into this market that is now more available to us because the competitor's moving out. So they didn't have, surprisingly enough, a whole bunch of people just sitting around doing nothing just in case more work came up. So they had to find the people and the money from within their organization. And as a result, this CRM project that was doing really, really well got put on the shelf. It didn't get completely shut down, but they put it on hold for, as it turned out, about 18 months. The people couldn't just come off of that project and go on to a completely different project that was focused on developing a new product, different skill set, different set of needs. But those people freed up that could then be reallocated across other initiatives in the portfolio to free other people up, to release some budget. There were some scheduling changes. There were some delays put in place. Some other things were sort of not started for a little bit longer in order to collectively within the portfolio bring the people and money together to launch a new product development initiative. And that's what happened. They ended up launching a very basic product within about 6 months to capture that market share. And within literally a month or so of the competitor pulling out, they started launching advertising and marketing campaigns. This is coming, engaging with customers. What kind of features do you want? How could we do this for you? And, really sort of doing a really good job at doing that. And they ended up getting about 60-70% of the market share that the competitor dropped. So really happy. from a perspective of the organization, way better for the bottom line than reducing costs by 3%. And then they went back, as I say, about 18 months later and finished off the CRM project, had to redo some of the work, had to rethink some of the suppliers, but was successful there. But that only happened because they had the portfolio mindset. So they said, look, this CRM project is really successful, but we're going to stop it anyway because it's really successful in the wrong way now because of something that has changed within the operating environment of the organization. You only get that ability when you're focused on the portfolio. If you just look at it as a project standpoint, no one's going to kill that CRM project because it was knocking it out of the park. Unfortunately, wrong park.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear, I guess, from the audience today, like, have you experienced some of these pivots in your organization, and have you been able to I guess apply portfolio thinking to adapt? So if you have anything to add from a commentary standpoint, I'd love to hear from the audience. A yes, no, or we experienced it, but it didn't go so well. Love to hear that too.
That's why you're here.
That's exactly right. And when we talk about, let's look at the benefits of portfolio thinking, we talked about a few of those examples probably in that practical example. But what do those look like across the board, Andy?
I'm not going to read all the bullet points on the right hand side. You can read those as well as I can. But all of those big things on the left, it really does make a significant difference in many different areas. Improved alignment is the obvious thing, right? When you've got executives driving the work that gets done, you've got greater confidence that we're doing what matters to the business or to the business leaders. And it also means that no matter where you are within that flow, whether you're a VP of a department, whether you're a project manager or program manager leading a team, or whether you're the most junior team member who's just assigned to a piece of work, you understand how what you're doing contributes to the success of the business. And you know as well as I do from your own jobs, when you get up in the morning and you go to the office virtually or physically, and you know why you're doing what you're doing, it's a lot easier to be motivated than if someone just says to you, there you go, you've got to do this, you don't have any context for it, just get it done. Now, if any of you have watched Severance, right? They're just doing the data clean thing and they have no real idea why. And how do you stay motivated in that environment? When you understand why you're doing what you're doing, much easier to stay motivated. That means you're more efficient and more effective. Individually, team level, organization level. You have a better context of what's going on. You're delivering better solutions. You reduce your time to value, which is critical these days. The less time it takes to go from this is what we need to do to this solution is now in market and delivering value to us and our customers, the better. And that directly drives financial performance, ROI, strategic gain, innovative gain, reputational gain, all of those different things. So you get all those things, and really and truly, it comes for free because you're still doing what you're doing. You're just doing it in a better way.
And you touched on this a little bit, but portfolio thinking benefits all functions. So you see the image here on the left. It's the entire organization is benefiting from the concept of portfolio thinking, and the business obviously benefits from that overall. But let's look at some of those specific benefits by role. Andy, I'd love you to walk through not necessarily the bullet points, but at a high level for each of these roles, the various benefits that they experience from adopting this mindset.
Absolutely. I mean, it does come back to that idea of have a better understanding of what you're doing, and therefore it's easier to stay motivated and deliver better results. It's fairly easy for the executives and business leaders, right? That they are frustrated in many organizations that they set goals and objectives, and then every year there's, well, we didn't achieve what we said we were going to achieve, or we only achieved what we said in 40% or 50% of our initiatives, and the rest of them underperformed or flat out failed. If you have a greater connection between what needs to happen and what we're doing and making sure that it is actually delivering what it's expected, then it's much easier for executives to feel, yeah, I get it. This makes sense. We're doing the right stuff in the right way, and we're seeing the evidence of that in the gains, financial and longer term strategic. If you're running a PMO or you're running a portfolio, well, The big gain is it shifts you from being reactive to proactive. When you go straight to the project level, then really and truly you're skipping over the PMO or the portfolio management function in planning and delivery. You're just going straight to the project managers. This project's now approved. Okay, let's get on with it. And sure, you may have a role in saying, okay, this team or allocating this and when it starts and everything else, but you're not directly involved in whether or not this is the right thing to do. So instead, you're reactive by just taking all that information from projects and consolidating reporting. And I used to work for a PMO where we had a discussion every week about whether it was acceptable to use 2-point font because that way we could get it onto a single sheet of paper. You know, it's not exactly why I'm sort of doing what I'm doing. So when you can be more proactive, then you can make a difference. It's like, okay, by being involved in this, I'm delivering value to the organization. I'm making sure we're doing the right things in the right way. I'm helping teams understand the context. I'm helping to implement the changes that are going to help the business to succeed. It makes it much more worthwhile. Program and project management, well, if you know what you're doing and you know that you're doing things to achieve the right results, it's a lot easier to stay motivated. It's much easier to manage for outcomes and not outputs. We all know that no one in the history of the world approved a project because they desperately wanted to spend $10 million delivering something on time, on scope, and on budget. The money is invested to generate a return. When the organization is focused on enabling that, it's much easier for the program and project managers to actually achieve that. From a change and a best practice standpoint within the organization, well, when everyone's doing the right things in the right way, well, that's a pretty nice place to work. And then when they're recognizing that the right things in the right way today are going to be the wrong things in the wrong way by next week, and there's processes in place to evolve that and not disrupt everything with change that is ill managed, that makes things easier to do. And again, when you've got that context, when you've got that portfolio focus, you know you're making the right adjustments at the right time, and everyone feels empowered to make the change as opposed to frustrated that change is being done to them rather than with them. And if you're doing the work, if you're one of those many people in an organization that's working as part of a plan driven team, part of an agile team, implementing change, using a new system, if you understand why and how it helps, it's a lot easier to engage. If I just sat here now and out of the blue said, I want everybody to stand up, no one's going to stand up because they go, what? That makes no sense. But that's effectively what we do to our team sometimes. Go and focus on this, do this, now do something completely different. What? Why? What changed? Why do I now have to stop doing this and do something different? That's what we do all the time to our team members. If we give them the context, they buy into it. And everything lifts up, everything improves. You're only as good as your weakest link. When you improve all of those links, the whole organization becomes stronger. I care about this stuff, Rachel. Can you tell?
Yeah, a little passion behind that one, which I appreciate. But I think it's a great context, right? I think it's important to notice that portfolio thinking isn't just for a certain exec level or something like that. It is truly for the entire organization to empower themselves and embrace to become better overall. But before we hop into the next topic, I do want to, I guess, ask everybody today. We've talked a little bit about how you're managing your portfolios today from a tool set perspective. What we now want to know is kind of what's your biggest challenge right now with managing your portfolio? And Andy alluded to some of these topics earlier on. But is it prioritization? Is it your resource management? Is it assigning the right people to the right things? Does it have to do with visibility and reporting? I would think that the 30% that noted spreadsheets as their source of truth for portfolios, maybe that's a common denominator. Financial management, or maybe it's just change. Maybe your biggest challenge is the need to constantly adapt, and that's hard to do with your portfolios today. So I'll give everybody a moment. I can't see the live results, so I don't know if Andy, if you can.
Not
but
yet.
everybody a second to answer this poll, and then we'll take a look at the results.
And wasn't it nasty of us to not give an all of the above option?
Yeah, no one's commented that in the chat, but I think they felt that way about the tool set poll question. Just revisiting some of the comments as we were talking through the practical example, I think are worth noting. We have pivots, it just adds more work. I think that's a very common occurrence. You're not alone in that. And then Michael said we have priority shifts mid-flight all the time. So would love to hear, how you're navigating those. But let's take a look at the results of this poll question. It looks like pretty close at the top. I wouldn't say tied, but pretty darn close.
Mhm.
Project prioritization and resource management, those are very common challenges, I think, and somewhat related as well. Visibility and reporting at 19%. And then we've got 12% with financial management and 12% saying change management as well. So thanks for your participation on that. It's obviously helpful for us to know, what are those biggest challenges that you're facing today. But let's talk about making this happen, Andy. So this quote is a great reminder, I think, of the challenges that we are trying to solve today. I think misalignment and change fatigue can't be solved with the old methods that we've been using, right? So portfolio thinking
Right.
isn't just new tech, it's just a new approach of work. So as Albert Einstein said, the significant problems we have cannot be solved at the same level of thinking in which we created them, right? So change is required.
Yeah, do
So
things
what does that,
different.
yeah, what does that look like from uh, a people process and tools perspective?
So people, process, and tools is the old cliche, I guess, but it's cliche for a reason. And you do need to focus on all of these things. And I put them in this order specifically because it starts with the people. If you want to change how you think about work, you have to recognize that an organization, a corporation, a company, a public body, whatever it is, doesn't think. It's not capable of it. It's a legal entity, it's a thing. It's the people that do the thinking. So you need to create an environment where people want to engage, put the work in, exercise the mental muscle, and come up with the best ways of thinking in order to do this. This is all about the people. Everyone talks about culture. Culture is a trailing indicator. Culture follows the changes in how you do things and how you operate, and that comes from the people. So engage people with what needs to be done, help them understand why you need to achieve what you need to achieve, and they'll be able to drive this kind of performance forward. If all you do is leave your people sitting there waiting for the next project to drop on their head, then that's all they're going to focus on. If you take a step back and say, hey, I know some of you don't care about this, but most of you do. Here's what we're trying to achieve as a company. Here's the big picture, not details, but given that context, it becomes a lot easier to make change. Then you can move on to your processes and say, okay, we're going to standardize our approaches, but we're going to standardize our approaches around a degree of flexibility. When I first started work, it was literally a case of here are the 25 different templates that you have to fill in because you want to launch your project. And we're going to reject this template if you haven't filled out every mandatory field in the right way. And it would sometimes take a day and a half just to be able to get the system to accept the template completion before it took 3 weeks for someone to come back and say they didn't understand an answer. You've got to have approaches that are flexible enough to reflect the reality of today, whether or not that's empowered teams who need to adapt and adjust based on the challenges they're facing, whether it's working in different ways, plan driven, agile, hybrid, whether it's different work structures, value streams, projects, epics, programs, products, whatever it might be. And then you need to recognize that what you do as a best practice today is going to be outdated tomorrow. So we have to continuously evolve, challenge it, look for better ways of working. And then from a tool standpoint, obviously you need a portfolio management tool that is going to help you to connect all this together. A spreadsheet is not an enterprise tool at any level. I love spreadsheets. I use them every day. I would not use them to manage 100% of my discretionary investment portfolio for, my personal life or for an employer or an organization, because wrong tool. The right tools are out there. They don't cost an arm and a leg. And not only can they give you the power to bring all these pieces together, the right tools can integrate with everything else you do in your organization. So you have an integrated backbone for your technology architecture, technology infrastructure, so that everything can flow seamlessly and support your processes. You don't rekey, you don't have to copy and paste, you don't have to take a report and throw it into a spreadsheet and then try and write some macros. You've got the right tools supporting what you do. If you do this, then you won't get it perfect in year one, but I guarantee by the end of quarter one, you'll see significant improvements. And that's what it's about, making the next quarter, the next day better than it was the last one.
Yeah, and I can't stress this enough. I think it's obviously not just about the software, and that's coming from somebody here at a software company. It's about enabling your people to do their best work, and that means standardizing what makes sense, integrating systems like Andy talked about, and giving teams the autonomy to operate within some guardrails, right? And I think Tempo's platform is designed to support all three of these pillars. Obviously, recommend if you haven't checked out Tempo's platform to do so for your portfolio needs. And with that, we're going to go through some key takeaways, and then we'll get to some of the questions. I know we're getting shorter on time. We won't go through these bullets in full detail, but I think the common themes here are, projects and programs are at the execution layer, but portfolios are where the strategy lives. When you manage the portfolio intentionally, you unlock better engagement from your team, better resource planning, and more predictable outcomes for the business. The one that I like to call out on this one is actually one of my favorite messages here is you won't get it perfect the first time, and that's okay. I think that's important because portfolio thinking is iterative. We looked at that 5-step process, but like I said, it's a continuous process holistically. And the best organizations are building that flexibility and keep continuing to improve and focus on that. And the right tooling just helps you do that. So with that, I want to invite everybody to the next webinar here at Tempo, where we're going to be talking about specifically what does portfolio thinking look like leveraging Tempo's platform. So we will cover how to align your talent, time, and capacity in a unified portfolio view. The link is in the chat, so highly recommend checking it out, registering if you can't attend live. We will be sending the recording as well for you to check out post the live event. I will put that in the chat for everybody to see. But highly recommend checking that out and would love to keep the conversation going at that event. We're here to help you take that next step towards portfolio thinking here at Tempo. And any way that we can help you do that, we are happy to. And then the much awaited question and answer section. If you do have questions, I recommend putting them in the Q&A and we'll tackle those now over the next 10 or so minutes. A reminder that this session was also recorded and you'll be receiving a recording link as well as the slides to this presentation in your inbox likely tomorrow. So thanks everybody for joining, but we'll get to some questions. Andy, first question coming in here is how do organizations balance the need to deliver projects for departmental needs and then portfolio or enterprise needs? Is there conflict there?
There's the potential for conflict. And close your ears now if you're working at a senior level in the department. PMI did a study late last year, early this year, that basically showed that departmental projects had the highest failure rates of any type of project anywhere in an organization. Everyone says IT projects fail. No, department projects fail spectacularly. I can't remember what the exact numbers were, but it was like greater of 80% that failed. We have to get to the point where we recognize that departmental initiatives need to be killed off. And I don't mean individuals, I mean the concept of. I know departments need to improve. They need to invest in modernizing technologies and workflows, eliminating outdated, high-risk processes. They need to modernize. They need to keep the lights on. I get all that. But what matters is the strategic growth of the business. So business leaders need to align the growth of the business, the priorities of the business, and the growth and needs of individual departments in a much better way than they have in the past. It's not unusual, in fact, it's very common to see an organization say, our goals and objectives are to focus on revenue growth, expanded market share, greater profitability from our products, blah, 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 blah. But then an operational department head be told they need to reduce costs by 10%. Well, which is it? Do you want me to support the expansion of the business or do you want me to cut costs? Because if I do one, it's going to damage the other potentially. We need to make sure that we better align because all the time, the bonus of that operational VP is dependent on whether or not they hit their cost reduction target. Guess where their focus is going to be? They're going to be approving initiatives that deliver that cost saving. And they'll try and find ways that suggest that that also supports the expansion of the business. But at the end of the day, when push comes to shove, you manage what you measure. And if you're measured on cost reduction, that's what you're going to manage to. So we need to do a better job as organizations on that. And we need to make sure that the work of departments, the projects that are being done at the department level, are much more aligned with supporting the business. They're not two separate things. They're two shades of the same thing and they need to be better aligned. So that's how we need to deal with it long term. Short term, we just got to make sure that we're focusing those execs on the right goals and objectives and the right performance criteria.
Great. Thanks, Andy. Another question coming in, it says, it takes us too long to figure out how to best initiate changes. How can we speed things up? I guess my first question would be, what tool set are you using to evaluate what's in flight today? And then obviously being able to do any sort of scenario planning based on what may or may not be the case in the future. I don't know, Andy, if you have anything specific around outside of tool set, because that's where my head goes first, but from your
I
perspective.
mean, if you need to make a change, you need two things. You need information and you need authority. So the tool set provides the data, the information, the ability to generate the insight that drives the decision-making process. So you've got to have the integrated tools there so you can look at this because you're making portfolio level decisions. You've got to have portfolio level information. You can't just look at a subset of projects. So that's the first piece. If that technology integrated isn't there, it's generating the right data, if you're not capturing the right information, you're never going to be able to make good decisions quickly. The second piece is you need to empower the people closest to the work to make those decisions. The cliche is ask for forgiveness, not permission. But if you want to make a decision quick, you can't send it up the chain of command to the sponsor, who then has to get in touch with their boss, who has to get in touch with the C-suite, and then everything comes cascading down. And all of a sudden, you've wasted 4 weeks that we end up making the same decision we would have made anyway if we just allowed the PM or the portfolio or the program manager to make the decision. So you have to empower people to make those decisions. But that's more than just, okay, Rachel, you're allowed to make that decision now. It's about, okay, Rachel, you're allowed to make that decision now, and here's how we're going to give you the confidence and the competence, the skill development, the education, the information you need to be able to make those decisions correctly. So that's how we do it. Not easy, but not as difficult as many organizations make it, and certainly not as difficult as it is in many organizations because they refuse to give up control.
Yeah, and you alluded to this, but portfolio thinking is for everyone, right, in the organization. So
Right.
it should be for all of the various levels within the organization, and that speed of change should, I guess, become faster when everyone is kind of, again, on that same page from the get-go. Question coming in. Do you have an opinion on best practices, which stakeholders review the portfolio, how often, what inputs? That actually kind of alludes to what we just talked about, but and what are the expected outcomes in review from those stakeholders?
Does Andy have an opinion? Well, what are the odds?
Of course he does.
I think in terms of reviewing at a portfolio level, it needs to be high level. It needs to be executive driven, right? I got no problem with a project manager saying, this isn't working, we need to do something differently. And making that change, working with the stakeholders in order to drive that change. But a lot of the time, the change is coming from the portfolio, from business leaders who are saying, okay, the environment's changing. The example I used of the CRM that switched to a new product. A lot of the change is being driven by the operating environment, by external factors, and therefore coming through the executives. They need to be engaged, I'll say constantly, and that doesn't mean that, they're spending 8 hours a day, 5 days a week managing the portfolio. But it does mean that they've got a link to the current portfolio dashboard on their desktop that links through to the Tempo or whichever tool you're using that gives them up-to-date real-time information. And they're checking it every day. and they're looking for variances and they're looking for trends. And if something doesn't seem right, or if something happens outside of the organization that causes them to look at the portfolio with a slightly different lens, then they're driving that through. This isn't about every quarter we'll sit down and do a formal review. It's about every day something might be different, and we need to just look at that and consider it and then take the appropriate actions. It really is every day. I'm not just using that as hyperbole.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. And then I would be remiss to not include this question because AI is of on top of everybody's mind. So I just want to throw this last bone to you, Andy, on AI and portfolio management. Your thoughts, please, and we'll end with that question.
Filtered thoughts, because I'm not allowed to use bad words. I think AI has a lot of potential. I think right now AI can't live up to the hype. And not just in a portfolio management context, but in a lot of different contexts. Gen AI is great at generating data, information. Some of that is helpful. At a portfolio level, we need to have more of a machine learning focus. We need to have more of an agentic AI focus if we're actually going to be able to do analytics. And Gartner did a study that suggested 40% of AI initiatives are going to be cancelled by the end of next year. That tells you something. And that's Gartner. It's not just me saying that. They also did a study that said that of the 1,600 or so agentic AI software platforms, something like 13 actually had real agents. It's not living up to the hype right now. The potential is awesome. The ability for AI to, yes, balance the portfolio, to the comment that just came in, to help with planning analytics, to do the analysis of different portfolio mixes, it's going to be freaking awesome in the next few years. As of right now, I think that you can use those capabilities, real or claimed, from the different tools, but you need to be very skeptical because there is a very good chance that AI is saying the wrong thing with absolute confidence.
And we will end with that. I will say that to the point of AI being incorporated in some of these things, I think it's definitely something to try, right? I think
Can't ignore it.
yeah, it will be here for forever. So I think embrace it is in any way that you can. And I know Tempo here, we're looking at incorporating AI into a lot of our various products and excited about the roadmaps ahead of the usability of those for our customers. And so, yeah, it may not be perfect today, but it's definitely something that will be transforming the speed at which we're able to do work, I think, in the future. So
You've got to get ahead of it for sure. Somebody said to me that, you know, AI is not coming to take your job, but a project manager, program manager, portfolio manager, executive, whatever, who knows how to use AI might just be. So you definitely need to embrace it. You just have to be very, very cautious.
and with that, we're almost at the top of the hour. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Before we head off today, I do want to launch one final poll. If you do want to learn more about Tempo, I alluded to some of our AI capabilities on the roadmap, but if maybe you're a current customer, but maybe you're not, and we'd love to, I guess, talk to you a little bit more about our products and how they might be able to help you in implementing portfolio thinking within your organization. If you're part of that 30% that are utilizing spreadsheets today, I highly recommend selecting yes, and at least just getting a conversation with our team here at Tempo to better understand how our tool set at a very low level can help you improve just processes and how your team works today. So we'll leave that poll up just for a last little bit. And again, thank you everybody for joining us. I appreciate the thank yous coming in, and we hope to see you on the next webinar in a couple weeks. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks, Andy, for joining us. Appreciate it as always, and we will see everybody next time. Thanks again.
Thanks, everyone.